Hello everybody. I've made like 4 podcasts in the last week, but it's Mercury retrograde at the minute, and I feel like that makes me nervous about posting things because I feel like during Mercury retrograde things get misconstrued very, very easily. So this is probably going to be the worst case of things getting misconstrued of anything that I will post, if I post it, which I probably will. So just take this with a pinch of salt if you're listening, that my wording or my tone or whatever might not be the way that it's intended to be in my head. But what I wanted to talk about today is like nonchalance, but not in like the typical internet sense of nonchalance, more in the sense of pick-me-ism nonchalance, and specifically what has brought this to the forefront of my mind right now is I'm watching Wicked right now, actually, and how there's always this dynamic, right? There's 2 characters. One's like the outgoing extroverted girl who's like liked by everyone and whatever, and the other one is the quiet, nonchalant, nerdy, like doesn't really have many friends, doesn't really know anyone girl. And it's always that girl who is the secretly talented one, or the one that prevails in the end. And this is replicated throughout media constantly, specifically in the like 2010s. If you look at like Bella Swan in Twilight and Katniss Everdeen in The Hunger Games, and I fuck knows what her surname is, but Triss in Divergent, it's all a case of nonchalant girl being the prize. And I've just been thinking about it, and thinking about sort of when I watch these movies, and I love these movies, don't get me wrong, I was like raised on those movies, or maybe not raised on them, but like when they came out, I loved those movies, and it's just got me thinking about those arcs or those stereotypes that were promoted as desirable for women, you know, quiet, conservative, modest, only spoke when spoken to, not showing off your skills or not bragging about anything ever. And it kind of seems outdated to me. And may I add, this is not a new thought. Like, this is something that is very well spoken about online, about how like this archetype of woman is quite not, I don't know what the opposite for progressive is. Like, it kind of just perpetuates a lot of old stereotypes around women knowing their place, or like not being confident, and that the world's just going to be given to you because someone's going to see your potential, and then everything will fall into place and you don't have to go out and take anything for yourself. It just is. And the antithesis of a lot of these characters in the movies are very extroverted women, very popular women, very well-liked women, and they're well-liked, but they're feared, or the liking to them is superficial, or it's not genuine, or it's more rooted in resentment. And I feel like it's this mindset that you can't be pretty, well-dressed, eloquent, and educated, and magic, and a vampire. I don't fucking know where the vampire part comes in, but you can't be all those things and have any other depth. You can't be the chosen one if you already are pretty popular, kind of potentially white as well comes into it, and, you know, on a conventional path, because you already are the chosen one. And I think that's the crux of the message, is that the way that these stories tell these tales is that it's like the underdog story, right? And everyone loves an underdog story, and everyone loves the whole, you know, to villainize the popular girl, whatever it is. And upon observing, like, these movies, or, like, looking back on it, and I was actually out with a friend today, and we were talking about how, like, I was saying about how I was raised, I don't know why I keep saying I was raised, because these films came out when I was, like, 10 to 15, but, so, like, I would watch these films growing up, and it made me think that to get what I wanted, I had to be like Bella Swan, or Katniss Everdeen, or whoever the fuck it is, and be this, like, cool girl, this, you know, nonchalant girl, this girl that doesn't care about how she looks or what she wears, or doesn't have many friends and things like that. And it was like, because the worst thing to be to a teenage girl is a bimbo, or high maintenance, or too much, right? It was like the main, I think, selling point for these protagonists was that they never asked for too much. They never took too much. They knew their place. And as a result of that, they got rewarded with supernatural powers, or the ability to overthrow the government. You know, like, whatever it was, they got chosen, right? And I feel like in my generation, like earlier end of Gen Z, that bred a lot of girls that were very jarring, me included, might I add. This is not a me and them, this is an us, this is a collective, because I've spoken to a lot of my friends about this, and they also think the same, that we were conditioned through those narratives to believe that being the popular girl that wears makeup and cares about how she looks and what she wears and who she hangs out with and who she dates and fuck knows what else, what other topics that are important to one of these girls, is wrong. And there seems to be this, and not so much now, but I still see it in these tropes online, there seems to be this theory, or this belief that you can't be one without the other. Like, no, you can't be one, I don't know how to word it. You can only be one or the other. You can't be both. You can't be pretty and have depth. You can't care about how you look and care about the economic state of the world. And simultaneously, you can't have interests. You can't be into archery and also want to get your nails done. You can't have an interest in the occult and also be, like, super popular and have loads of friends and go out on the weekends. Like, do you see where I'm coming from? It's like this rigid mindset. Even if you look back into the 90s, movies like The Craft, you know, like, it was the girls, and I love that film, don't get me wrong, like, this is not me shitting on any of this media, I love this media, but it's like these girls that have alternate interests had to have alternate personas to match, because God forbid someone who presents as a typical girl has more depth to her than just how she presents. And I have a friend who's a very, very good in like a case study of this. My friend Vicky, love that girl, miss you to the moon and back. But she is a perfect example of someone who presents very girly. You know, she's very into, like, her fashion and her makeup, and she's like a very beautiful girl. And I remember one time we went out, this was like a year ago, we went out and we bumped into these other girls who are like typically very old. And they said to her, they were like, we just can't believe that you play video games. They were like, we can't believe you play video games and are into horror movies and like the same music as us. And she was like, why? And they were like, because you don't look like it. And it's like, I actually made a podcast a while ago and caught some straights about how like alt is the new basic and whatever. And that, I feel like in that moment kind of proved my point that there's this kind of subconscious feeling that certain people need to look a certain way to be able to be accepted into a certain group or to be part of a certain club, whether that's you're into the occult, whether that's you're into fucking Five Nights at Freddy's, whether you're into archery or like whatever the fuck it is, whatever your niche is. It's like you have to look the part to be accepted. And especially coming from traditionally oppressed groups, it's funny that those groups that are systematically oppressed kind of then internalize that and project that onto normal presenting people, right? And that's kind of the point that I was making in my old podcast about being is like, you know, these communities were built around oppression. So shouldn't those people be the most understanding about not fitting in or not fitting a mold? Because you can look a certain way and be a completely different way. Like, if I had a fucking penny for the amount of times people had said to me, you act so different to how you look, or I thought you were a bitch, or, you know, you look like you would be so different, or when you speak, your mannerisms are so different to how you look when you're just like walking down the street, I'd be a millionaire. Because I feel like I think maybe a combination of like my dark features and also my huge major resting bitch face makes me look like a cunt. I'm sorry, mum, I know you don't like the word, but it makes me look horrible. And I'm not a horrible person, like I'm not at all, but like I also feel like it's a bit of a self-preservation method, because like I low-key don't want any men to approach me when I'm out, so it's easier to just walk around looking like a bitch and looking like completely unapproachable. But then I didn't realise, I kind of did realise, but it's like at that point I'm also like making myself unapproachable to like potential new friends. So it's kind of like this way up, but I guess I'd rather be alive and not locked in a man's basement than have a new friend. Like, I know that sounds extreme, but this is literally the reality that girls live in. But yeah, so anyway, me and Vicky talk about this a lot, about how she's like, you know, I feel like the way I look or the way I dress doesn't match what's going on in my head. And like the reason that we actually got so close, because we've known each other a really long time, but we've really gotten a lot closer over the last year. Happy friendversary to Vicky, by the way. Is that I felt she was one of the first people I'd met in a long time that wasn't already in my life, that I didn't have to worry about how I presented with her. She would just take information as it came, regardless of the way it was presented, you know? Like I could tell her something wearing a bin bag and it would be received the exact same way as I could tell her wearing a prom dress, you know? It's like, and I think typically people don't realize how much of an impact visuals have on communication. So, you know, like I've spoken about this before, but body language and tone of voice, I think account for like 80% of communication and how communication is taken. And I think the visual element of that is so overlooked. And I think a lot of people would like to say, oh, I don't judge a book by its cover, but you don't think you are, you know? Like, I know for a fact that when I meet someone for the first time, I'm big into fashion, and I always am aware of their outfit and what they're wearing. And I always find it interesting as my relationships develop with people to see what outfits they wear. Just because for me, it's a special interest. Fashion is a special interest, and seeing how someone dresses based on their mood and, you know, the color palettes and the silhouettes and how all those things change to me, is an interesting way to observe someone, especially someone that I don't know well yet. Because, like, with certain people that are in my life, that have been in my life a long time, it's almost like a prediction-based thing. I can kind of tell, because I know the way that person is or presents, it's not, something that's so obvious. And it's like, anyone listening probably thinks that I'm saying, like, I'm judging you. And it's like, I'm not judging you, but I am a very big, like, I very much dress based on how I feel. And it's interesting to see, to me, when I meet someone new, what they wear each time I see them for the first, like, I don't know, few months that I spend time with that person. Like, I feel like, to me, someone's wardrobe is an indicator of so much about that person, like where they got things from, what jewelry they choose to wear, how they choose to do their hair, what perfume they wear. All of these things are kind of subtle indicators of a wider part of their life that's more personal to them, because typically when people choose jewelry or perfumes or clothes or shoes, that's an independent process. It's an individual process. So to me, it's interesting to, it's like a point of conversation. Like, you ask someone, where did you get that from? Or I don't know, or what perfume is that, or whatever. And you, in having that conversation, learn a little bit more about them as a person. And each time that you meet someone, like the same person, obviously, over and over, you can have that conversation. You can start to build up this mental image of, where they like to shop, what, like, things they're interested in, if their jewelry follows a specific colour scheme. Do they like silver? Do they like gold? Do they like pearls? Are they into fine jewelry? Do they like chunkier jewelry? What do they like crystals? Like, these all help me to, and I think this might be a slightly like autism, ADHD thing of trying to understand people, is it helps me know what to ask. Because to me, how you present is the easiest way for me to find common ground. And I know you're probably thinking, whoa, you just said that you shouldn't have to look a certain way to fit in somewhere. I completely agree. And I stand by my point, but I also stand by this point that if I meet you and you tell me you love death metal, or you love like screamo music, right? And you dress like the most coquette girl I've ever seen, I want to know where that came from. Because if I meet you and you're wearing a fucking Slipknot band tee, I'm going to instantly know that about you. Unless you just like the t-shirt, and then fair enough. But like, if it's evident that these two things correlate, I kind of already know that thing. Whereas, if you're dressed completely coquette and all in white, but you love Slipknot, that's a conversation starter for me. It's like, how did you get from point A to point B? Why did you make those stylistic choices? Like, to me, it's very interesting. And the way people choose to put outfits together or put themselves together, to me, is like a real good way to understand someone's inner world in a way that they might not even be aware of. And this is, again, sorry to bring you up all the time, Vicky, but this is something that I remember when I first met Vicky that, like, we really clicked on. Is her jewelry collection is just immaculate. It's just incredible. And I remember thinking, like we have a lot of conversations about jewelry, and I remember saying to her, like, where'd you get your jewelry? And we were talking about jewelry, and like, you learn about someone's culture or, likes and dislikes, and it's just a way to like really understand someone more. And I think if you look at someone and you instantly go, well, you don't dress the way that I thought you would based on what I know about you, why is that? Or like, you don't look like you would like that thing, and it's used as more of a dismissive conversation rather than an inquisitive conversation. I think that's the difference. And I think a lot of people actually mean to make it an inquisitive conversation, but they don't realize that it can actually come across as quite dismissive. Like, I think a lot of times when people say, well, you don't look like you'd like this, or you don't look like you like that, it can come across as a little bit like, what the fuck am I meant to look like then? Do you know what I mean? And I think that's like sometimes how it can feel is like, well, I'm sorry that I don't look the part, which is like not a nice feeling, especially if you are someone that has any kind of neurodivergence and you've lived a life of masking. You're like, oh, I don't fit in, again, even though that might not have been the intention. But as you know, communication is very rarely received in the way that it was meant to be taken. And kind of going back to the initial point that I was making about, you know, nonchalance and these characters, one major thing about these characters typically in the movies is they dress down. There's not many context clues about why they choose certain outfits, or if there's any thought that's gone into those outfits. Or, you know, I actually read Twilight and Hunger Games books, and Hunger Games I think is slightly different because it's based in a state of poverty. So I think the accessibility to dress a certain way is limited. So maybe that isn't as relevant. But specifically in Twilight, Bella so often talks about how she just chucks something on and runs out the door, you know? Like it's an afterthought for her. And then, you know, it kind of, in the movies, is presented as like she's just this like girl next door that's kind of doesn't really like care about anything like that and is just like plodding along. And I think that's like, and you see in the early scenes, like the girls struggle to connect with her, I think, because they don't know what to talk to her about. Because visual context cues are typically the main way that we communicate with each other initially, obviously, until you get into like the nitty gritty. But when you first meet someone, that can be like a really good way to have discussions about things. And, you know, or like you see the car someone drives, or you see the hair, like, do they have a fucking mohawk? Like, I don't know. Whatever it is, it's all context clues into learning more about someone. And I think that it's potentially purposeful in these books, maybe aside from the ones that are like based in poverty, because obviously at the, like, you don't have the resources to be able to put on like an amazing outfit if you're living in poverty and you're living in a war zone, obviously. But it's like, it gives you, I feel that these characters were written in almost the way of a blank slate, because the less you can infer about someone, the more that you can project onto them. And I think being able to project onto someone is one of the most powerful tools you can use. Being a blank slate in marketing is one of the most valuable assets. So Nara Smith, for example, right? She's an example of a blank slate in marketing. She doesn't share any personal opinions that are would incite an emotional response. Her content that she creates is about something that is applicable to everyone, cooking, and everything is very chill, calm, relaxed. Obviously, it's got nothing to do with her outfits. Her outfits are amazing every time, but she's like a typical example of a blank slate. Bella Swan would be a typical example of a blank slate. New girl, don't know anything about her, doesn't dress in a way that would incite anything particular. So all you have to go off in any conversation that you have with someone that is a blank slate is your own projections of what you think based on those conversations. So all the conversations that you have, our brain is constantly filling in the gaps. Constantly, all the time. Our brain is trying to create a whole picture. If we don't have one, the brain will create one. So I think in books particularly, it's a lot easier to create the protagonist as a blank slate, because the reader can then build a story in their head. And obviously, you know, if you read, you'll know, like, it's a world, you know. Obviously, it's like just words on a page, but in your head, it's this whole world, and you know, have this visual of what this thing is. And it's the same in person. Like, if someone doesn't give you too much, everyone loves the mysterious cool girl, because you can just project whatever you want. And the thing is, most people don't realize they're projecting when they're doing it. And I think this is why I actually am so blatant now with who I am, and like the way I dress and how I choose to behave and whatever, because I don't like to be projected on. And if people project on me, I don't fuck with it. Like, I don't enjoy it. It makes me uncomfortable, and I feel like it can typically lead to resentment longer down the line, because it's like, it'll get to the point where I don't live up to their expectations, and then there's like resentment, and it's weird. And like, everyone knows that Everyone has been a victim of someone projecting an expectation onto them that they cannot obtain, nor did they say they were ever going to obtain, and it's led to resentment. Everyone knows what that feels like, and I just do not choose to abide by that. So for me, like, I'm very clear, you know, very early on, like the way I dress and the way I talk about things is very clear, you know, whereas I think certain people prefer to be a little more wishy-washy. And there's nothing, the thing is, right, I talk about this as, I don't want it to come across as like that if you don't have a distinct sense of style or you don't give away too much too soon, that this is wrong. It's not wrong. This isn't about right or wrong. This is just a perspective difference. And for me, I don't align with that because I am very sure of my sense of self. So I don't want people to make an image of who they think I am. Like, obviously, like, their own image based off of, like, my behaviour, that's different. But, like, you know, I don't really need to, like, keep people guessing. Like, I'm not a mystery. And I'm not trying to be a mystery. And I think that's the thing is when these characters or these people, whoever it is, whether it's fictional or in real life, if you're trying to create this air of mystery or this, you know, you want to be the muse or you want to be like this mysterious, like, dark feminine woman, I don't fucking know, like, it typically, I think, comes with this expectation that you are grounded and you are, you know, you don't care so much about superficial things because, like I said earlier, you can't be superficial and also have depth because those two just could never align ever. You know, if you couldn't detect my sarcasm, that was sarcastic. But I think this is the thing with, like, this whole nonchalant vibe is like, and the thing is I think I've said this before, but I think in my life I there's maybe 2 people I've met in my life ever offhand that I can recall that are genuinely nonchalant, and that's just the way they are. But so that for them is genuine, but I typically feel that nonchalance is actually not real. Like, if you are trying to be nonchalant, that defeats the purpose of being nonchalant. Like, by definition, nonchalance is not caring, but if you are trying not to look like you don't care, you are caring about trying to look like you don't care. So technically you're caring more than someone who just doesn't care about being perceived as a bimbo or a brat or a high maintenance girl. Like, you care more because you're trying to gain some kind of approval. And I think that's where it becomes frustrating because it's like almost slightly more transparent. It's like, why do you care? And this also, I talk about this from a female perspective because I am a female. I don't even like that word. It's a female perspective. It's a female-led perspective. I'm a girl, right? So this is the way that I'm not a man. I don't understand things from the male gaze perspective, nor do I really want to. But, so I don't know if this applies to men as well. I've definitely met men that, like, think they're nonchalant, and it's equally as cringe, and I think it's gross. And, like, I don't want people listening to this to think that I'm just calling out girls that do it, because I'm not calling anyone out. Like, I don't care. If you want to do this, you do this. But I'm just saying, like, I think it's kind of a weird way to be if you are trying to pretend that you don't care, but you actually do care. I think that means that you care more than someone who's not pretending that they don't care. I don't know. I'm going to end the podcast here because I feel like I'm, like, getting to the point where I feel like I have to keep over-explaining myself and apologising because otherwise I'm going to just be catching straights in the comments, but we'll see. Anyway, I love you guys. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you soon.